right. Welcome, everyone. Today's segment of the Royal Nugget. I'm so excited about everyone coming to listen to us now live and those who will be coming back to the recording. I am so awestruck with my guest that I have here tonight, Miss Chéri Allen. She is an awesome coach. She's an awesome business person, former federal employee out here she made a name for herself and all the things she was doing in the federal government. And I had the honor of her being one of my instructors as I was going through my coaching program. And so today she is gracing us with all of her expertise to tell how she was able to boost her income by $174,000 while she worked in the federal government. And I know that the tips that she's going to provide this evening will not only help federal employees, but those in the private sector as well. So first of all, I want to thank you, Chéri, for being here tonight for this great segment. And I also want to let our listeners know, share this information, share what you have, this a link with others so they too can join and be part of the conversation. This is a conversation that Chéri and I are going to have, but we also want your engagement. So make sure you are typing into the chat your comments, your questions, so we can all conversate together. So Chéri, again, thank you for being here this evening.
Truly, truly my pleasure. And thank you for the opportunity to share with you and all of those who are listening.
Thank you. So, first of all, tell us about Chéri. Tell us about yourself.
So, Chéri is maybe a typical story, I think, of being a young girl growing up in the streets of New York. Grew up in Queens, inner city experience, schools that I attended, public schools. But I was made aware very early that my parents highly valued education, primarily because they had not gone as high as they wanted me to go. And so one thing I knew very early on was that education was going to be the key to a lot of doors. And so as I was going through my process, going through high school, I ended up pregnant at 16, and I had my daughter at 17. And so that then gave me even more motivation, more focus to make sure that I didn't become a statistic and that I actually completed school. So I graduated from high school 6 months early. I went straight to college. I completed my undergraduate degree. I remember I took my finals 1 week, had my daughter, and finished the finals the next few days after I had her. So it was like that kind of determination. Nothing was going to stop me from continuing to proceed forward. And then after that, I got married and moved from New York to Maryland. But before I moved, I entered the federal government in the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I worked in Queens at a VA clinic. And that's where my story began.
Okay. Awesome. So you told me a little bit about how you started back in the early 90s in the federal government. And so tell us about how you made the decision on, I need to reach higher than what I am in order to get to where I want to be, because I know these are some of the tips that our listeners are going to want to know.
Yes. So the story about me even entering the federal government, I think is also going to provide some insights for people. So when I was in New York and in college, I applied for the federal position that I acquired through the school. And I had no interviewing training or classes at that point in time. I didn't know how to fill out that. Remember that long 171?
Yes.
Oh my God.
171.
I was in that office for like 3 hours trying to fill out this long form by myself. So anyway, I did. I submitted it. I forgot all about it. And then I got this call from these people talking about, hey, we want to interview you for a summer position. And I'm like, okay, sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I get off the phone and I tell my mother, I'm like, Mom, I have to go to Brooklyn. I live in Queens. I have to go to Brooklyn to this interview. And she's like, okay, baby. And she didn't like to drive on the highway. So she tells her friend, and she's like, Audrey's going to take us. And I said, okay, good. So I'm like, well, what should I wear? So I said, well, I think I should dress up. Now, again, remember, I don't have any examples in my immediate family at this point around, people in the professional realm. And so I was like, I'm going to wear my Sunday best. And I put on this yellow and white 2-piece floral dress set. And I went to this interview and I interviewed, and I guess the lady was looking at me like, she trying so hard. I'm not sure. No, this is not business professional, but she's such a sweet girl. And I think that's what eventually made that lady hire me. So she hires me. I get the job. And at first I remember thinking, I'm not going to take this job because it says night. It said NTE.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I don't want to work at night. And my mother said, girl, you take that job. And what I learned was NTE stands for not to exceed. So anyhow, I go get the job. So now I'm in this, federal career. I'm doing pretty good. But again, my mindset started there. We worked in the basement as students. And I was like, well, how do you become permanent around here? Mm-hmm. And so I would roam upstairs to like where the people and the humans were, because we were downstairs. I don't know what was down there with us in the basement, but it was really creepy in the basement.
Okay.
And our job was to take out medical records that they were then going to ship and archive these medical records away. So I would roam upstairs and try to meet people. Mm-hmm. And I met my first supervisor, Amy Brown. And Amy was very nice, and she would talk to me about what I needed to do, how I needed to be. And so I told Amy, I said, Ms. Brown, I want to work permanently. And she said, well, Chéri, when you graduate, then apply. And I said, okay. So that was probably like 2 years before I graduated from school. And then I applied and I got the job there, working at the clinic there. So my first lesson is, I knew temporary could end at any time. Once I learned what not to exceed was, I was like, every time the end date came, I was like, well, what am I going to do now? Right. So I didn't like that feeling of this is temporary. So I needed to learn, how do I make this permanent? So I'm always looking at, what's the next step? What step do I need to take to make sure that I'm okay as I pivot? Mm-hmm. And that the first step was becoming permanent. Did that. So I'm working the permanent job in New York there. I graduated with my bachelor's degree, but I had really no professional experience. So as I went to continue to work, they were looking for trainers to do total quality management training. Do you remember that when the government was doing total quality management training? It's like the equivalent of Lean Six Sigma, but way back when. Okay. And so they were trying to be more efficient and all the things. And I was like, I could do that. Mm-hmm. And then when they said yes, I was like, oh, I need to figure out how to do this. Okay. So my next thing was just raise your hand and volunteer and believe in yourself. What I did know about myself was that I could learn anything. I could learn anything. And as long as I applied myself, I would be great at it. That was my belief going in. And that came from my parents, my father, my mother. You can do whatever you want to do. Apply yourself, put your head in the game and do it and get it done. So I became a total quality management trainer, which then gave me exposure to larger parts of the organization. So that's sort of where my love for training came into play, and where my desire to say, hey, if you just volunteer for stuff, you might just get it. So that was time number 2. I got the job. Became permanent. And now time number 3, I became a trainer with no facilitation skills, no training certificate or credentials. Right. I ended up, doing pretty good. So now fast forward, how did I want more for myself? Well, I was like, DC is, I guess, the headquarters location for all these federal government places. Because in Queens, it was like an anomaly that clinic was there. So otherwise I would have had to go to Manhattan. And I wasn't even used to taking the trains. So this was like really me going from my house to like 15 minutes away. So I said, if I'm going to do this, make this a government, federal career, I
Mm-hmm.
probably need to go where all the federal jobs are. And
Right.
I knew a little bit about it because my brother lived in Maryland. He's a doctor at the Pentagon, and my sister lived in Maryland. She's a nurse. I'm like, I've been there. It looks pretty nice. I'm going to go. So I interviewed for a job with Peace Corps. Now, Peace
Mm.
Corps is, I think it's an accepted service agency.
Right. Yes. Yes.
I
Yes.
didn't know none of that stuff. So here I
Yes.
had a competitive position, but I'm applying for jobs all over. Like I was doing probably 10 applications, 171s, packets this big every week. And I
And
was
you had to mail them. You had to
I
mail
was mailing them
those in. Everything back then. No online systems.
nothing. And I was like, I'm gonna get me a job in Maryland. I mean, or DC. And sure
Mhm.
enough, Peace Corps called, and I was like, yeah, I can do that. So this was more like they're hiring for volunteers to go overseas and do Peace Corps volunteer work. So I took the job, and then when I realized I was in an accepted service, it was a 2.5 year appointment. I was like, well, they can renew you once, and I was like, oh, by then I'll find another job. I'm not gonna worry about that. And so I did that job 2.5 years. Before the 2.5 years came, I was already in another position. I started applying for I was like, I got to get back into competitive. And
Okay.
so I went back into competitive service. And then that's when I started, I got back into, where did I go? To FEMA. But let
Mhm.
me tell you this story about salary. So when I was a summer intern, I was at like, what was it? 16,446 was
Okay.
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine, like living off of 16,446. Now, I guess I can because I was still kind of in my parents' home, in my husband's
Yeah,
parents'
that
home.
was a different day back then.
Different day. And
Yeah.
so you hear that today, you're like, what? So how
Yeah.
do you do this, right? So I when I moved to Maryland and then I got the Peace Corps job, I was then applying for the competitive service. So FEMA was the ones who hired me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was for a contract specialist role. So far I've been like a registration clerk at the VA for veterans making their appointments. Then I was the hospital-based home care coordinator, doing the coordination of the social worker, the doctors for the veterans. Then I was a trainer.
Mm-hmm.
And now and then I was like a HR recruitment person for the Peace Corps volunteers. Then FEMA said, well, I was an outstanding scholar. I had a 4.0 GPA when I graduated.
Okay.
And the position was a 7, 9, 11, 12, 13. Okay. So I was like, and I said, that's the position I want. I want one of those jobs that once you're in, you
Yes.
can go
Yes.
all the way up to a 13.
Yes.
So those were the only jobs I applied to. Because again, from a strategic perspective, I'm like, I don't like this having to apply for these jobs every time. And, I
Mm-hmm.
want to get in and then as long as I'm performing, I
Right.
get my next grade. So when I was interviewing for the job for FEMA, the HR recruiter said, well, we can bring you in at what was it, a 7? And I was applying for the 9. And I was like, the higher step. But they said, no, we have to start you at the 7. And I was like, okay, because it's a career ladder. So we got to bring you at the 7. I said, okay. And I was like, I'll take it. But I just never felt right about that. And I didn't know that you could negotiate
Mm.
in the federal government. I didn't know that I could have negotiated steps.
They don't tell you that.
They didn't tell me that.
Yes.
Right? So
Yeah.
I took it. I had to go back a little bit because I was probably like a step 2, a 7, step 2, or whatever. So they started me like at a 7, whatever. And I was like, okay. When I got in a couple of years of working at FEMA, then I went to Department of Education. I started learning a little bit more because I moved from contract specialist work, which I was horrible at, and I went to HR work.
Okay.
And that's where you start learning stuff, right? And I was like, oh, I could have negotiated my steps.
Mm-hmm.
I made every employer pay for that every time I interviewed for a job and I negotiated my salary. So that was because they don't tell you. And so one of the big things that I try to tell federal employees is that you can negotiate your salary, right? In terms of steps.
Right.
You can't be afraid to ask because they can make lots of things happen, as we see now.
Yeah. Yeah.
The unimaginable things that are happening now, and
Yes.
we were scared to ask very simple things that were in accordance with the 5 CFR regulations.
Right. Right.
Don't be afraid to have the conversations and to ask for what you're worth.
Mm.
So anyway, that was how I got, to DC, and I moved around. So I went from FEMA to education. And at education, after I learned a little bit about HR, I was like, I think I'm ready to get my 14.
Mm-hmm.
And so I stayed there long enough to do the ladder because that was why I was there. And I wanted them to give me an opportunity for 14. And they were dragging their feet and hemming and hawing.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was also going through the loss of my father. He was dying at that time. So
Oh.
I was kind of like going back and forth to New York, trying to figure this work thing out. And it was, kind of a crazy time. But I remember saying, you know what? I'm just going to apply to other jobs and then I'll just move on. And I applied to the other jobs. I remember telling my employer at the time, FEMA, that I had gotten an offer. And it was right across the street because FEMA and education are literally across the street from each other. And they were like, we can give you the 14. And I thought, is this a miracle? What happened? And based on principle alone, I had packed up my office and everything. I was like, absolutely not. Thank you, but no thank you. It's a little too late. So I left.
Uh-huh.
Again, I'm getting ready to enter I guess it was a 343 position, working as a program management analyst. I was in the HR role, and now I'm doing this program and management analyst role. I'm like, I can do it. I can figure it out. So I went across the street and I worked there, got my 14 there. And then I worked and worked, and I loved everything I did. And then I was like, but this is policy stuff, and I didn't enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and on the elevator when we used to go into, well, we're back in the office, or people are back in the office now, but before now, there was the retirement postings on the elevator about someone who was leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to retire, and they worked in the training office, which is where I wanted to be. So I go down to talk to the training director, and I said, hey, I see so-and-so is leaving who I didn't know. And I said, I'd love to do a detail in her position.
Mm-hmm.
And the training director is like, well, we don't really have an opening. And I was like, yeah. I said, but if we do a detail, like I could cover the work while you're doing the recruitment. And turns out they allowed me to do it. And that's where I learned about coaching.
Mm.
So I managed the coaching program. I learned all about coaching. And again, strategically, I'm like, well, the only people that got coaches at that time was managers, team leaders, supervisors, and executives. I was none of those. And I said, well, listen, if I'm going to promote this program, I need to have the experience. Mm-hmm. So I can authentically tell people how good coaching is. And so they gave me a coach, and it was transformational. Mm. And that was when I fell in love with coaching, and I worked in education for that period of time until it was time to go again. Mm-hmm. So I'll pause there because I can tell the story all the way to the end. But do you have any questions so far?
I was going to ask you about when did that coaching come into play in your, as your career was going forward. So keep going there. Like, so you got a coach. So, and you said how transformative it was for you. Mm-hmm. And so how did your coaching experience, being a coachee or a client, influence your mindset moving forward?
Yes. So my coach, my presenting issue or topic with my coach was, I'm so overwhelmed with so much. Like I have so many things that I have to do. And, the coach, as a great coach does, asks you questions about, how did you come to be this person that you are? And I was like, I like to volunteer for stuff. I like to always raise my hand. And then we got even back to the point of like, well, how did I become that person? And my mom was 43 years old when she had me. So my upbringing was always around her. I saw her helping so many people, and usually they were older women, right? And she was doing, feeding people, taking food, checking on people. So I became a big helper. I was my mom's sidekick, and I carry this. I can help you. Oh, let me get the door, and that was just my nature. So
Right.
at work, as a professional, that's who I was. Oh, I can help you with that. Oh, you got a project? Oh, you need me to help you with that? And that's who I became. And I was actually doing this to myself,
Uh-huh.
taking on all these things and overwhelming myself. And I discovered through the coaching that I had low impulse control. Now, if you do emotional intelligence, that's one of the characteristics, they test. And I was like, oh, I have low impulse control. Okay. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
That's like when somebody asks you to do something before you think about, can I even do this? You're like, yeah, sure, I can do this.
Right.
You go back to your desk or you go back and look at your calendar. You're like, I can't do it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But you said yes. And now your word is on the line. And so you figure it out and you do it and you do all the things. And we'll talk about that in another time. But
Right.
that's that superwoman syndrome stuff that I talk about. I
Yes.
became superwoman because I kept
People
doing it.
pleasing. People pleasing.
Yes, 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 yes. Well, I told her that cape came on early. So
Yes.
I ended up, she told me we had some very simple practices in coaching. I needed to sit on my hands in meetings. So it wasn't the first hand to go up and go, I can do it. I had to do like little simple stuff like that, but it was life changing.
Mm-hmm.
She told me when I think I know the answer to something, like she's like, well, what can you do if you even if you know the answer? I was like, well, I probably should really go back and double check that my answer is what is actually reality. So coaching was transformational in the way that it made me show up as a professional.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I took on coaching, and then I created a program. It was the first program really in the federal government at the time. This was way back in 2000. And so I don't know if you remember what were they? We still use them, although they've been updated. Not KSAs, the ECQs.
Right. Yes.
So I'm again from a strategic perspective. I'm like, this is a great program. They were giving me $500,000 back in 2000 to focus on coaching and use for coaching, and I'm like, somebody at some point is going to say, what's the business impact of this?
Right.
How
Right.
does this relate to the strategic objectives of the organization? So I started aligning. I was like, well, I'm going to use the ECQs. And I started mapping out, asking my midpoint questions and my endpoint questions to the clients to say, how is this supporting you? All anonymously, but aggregated information. So I started reporting out on the benefits of my program. So again, me thinking ahead about what the organization, because I'm thinking if this was my money, I would want to know how is this benefiting? So I tried to think like the leaders, and sure enough, when they asked for it, I had the data, and I could prove that coaching was making an impact. So that was where I started learning how to manage a coaching program. I wasn't a coach yet, and then I left government in 2005. But before I left, American University was like, hey, Department of Education is doing a novel program called coaching and blah, blah, blah. So I got to do presentations. Do you remember, what was it called? The Excellence in Government Conference.
Yes. Yes.
They used to give us such good lunch. Do you remember those days? We used to get such good, it was so fancy. We had speakers like Dan Pink and like really great authors. It was a big deal. And so I got to present at one of the Excellence in Government conferences on coaching and how I was aligning it to the strategic goals of the organization. So I kept doing things and getting visibility and getting noticed with regard to what I did with this program. So again, but thinking ahead, how do I position myself in order to show that I'm a strategic thinker, be proactive, always take opportunities to speak and to present. And those were the things that were in my mind as I was scaling this government ladder, to make sure that I could meet my income goals. And all my income goals was to become a GS 15. Like I hadn't decided whether I wanted to be an executive yet, but I knew I wanted to be a 15. So as I left government, I got an offer I couldn't refuse. I always test the market even when I have a job and it's good. just to see, do I still get interview calls? Do I still, is my resume still working? What's trending in the market? Do I interview well?
Right.
And I probably was doing that, and I got a call, and this company said, "Hey," it was a learning management systems company, and they said, "Hey, we'd like to bring you on." And I said, "Okay." And they offered me. So this was like, so right now I'm scaling. I do the GS7 through the 13, 14. I get my 14 over, at education, and then I get this call for an offer that I couldn't refuse. And I accepted because they wanted to pay me like $40,000 more than I was making.
Okay.
And I thought, well, who would say no to that? Now, I didn't know anything about technical systems like learning management systems. I don't have coding, engineering, none of that stuff. But I said, I could learn it. And what I don't know, I know how to find the right people who can mentor me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. So that was the first big jump. After that, I stayed out. I did that. It was a great experience. It was the best learning experience of my career because I also wanted to know, could I hold my own in the private sector as
Mm-hmm.
I was doing in the federal government? So
Mm-hmm.
I had this constant need to go, am I as good as I think I am? I think I am, but I need to prove this because I've never been in the private sector. And when I did, I had a great experience. I learned so much about contracting from the vendor's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
My manager at the time, and I still talk to her because she was my first corporate manager. She showed me how to do like stakeholder engagement and really identify who my stakeholders were and how to cultivate relationships. So it was so educational from the perspective of how to be a professional, but from the corporate perspective,
Right.
working with the government. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was a great experience. Then I came back to government because I could see the tide turning
Uh-huh.
and the administration changes that were probably about to happen. And I thought, they usually cut contracts. So let me get back into government now because like all my benefits, right, and my years of
Mm-hmm.
service was the majority was in government.
Okay.
So I took the initiative to pivot back, and then I came back to government. And then I had another one of those offers
Mm-hmm.
that I couldn't refuse. After a couple of years, I was like, let me, go back out and see what's happening in the marketplace. And I got a call, and they
Mm-hmm.
said, we'd love to hire you, and we want you to do change management. And we want you to be a sub for Booz Allen. And I thought, Booz Allen, Hamilton? Like, that's amazing. I think they're a great company.
Right.
And I don't know if you remember A76 competitive sourcing. There was a point in time when government was doing this big thing about trying to look at all these functions that they could outsource to
Right.
private companies.
Yes. Yes.
And we had Booz Allen was one of the contractors that was running our competition. And I used to look at the consultants and I was like, I could do that. I
Mm-hmm.
think I could do that. And here was my opportunity. And again, you're talking a $40,000 increase
Mm-hmm.
in salary. And I'm thinking, this is phenomenal. I can't say no. I
Right.
don't know much about change management, but guess what? What did I say? I could learn it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sure enough, I did. I went, took the ProSci change management certification. There were things and even coaching that I had to pay for myself. So I invested in myself, and then I
Mm-hmm.
had the government pay for what they could pay for.
Right.
And then the corporation that I worked for paid for some things. So I learned and I absorbed everything that I could. And then that's when I came back to government the last time, and I was at DHS, Homeland Security. And that was a whole nother experience that was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I've been trying to take notes and keep up with the tips and things that you have been dropping. And one of the things I know and heard from you, first of all, is when you first started, way back when you were still in New York, you went searching. You knew that there was more, and you found a mentor. And you continue to do that throughout your government career in various ways. And then I also heard you say that you were curious. that started you searching. You were curious, you wanted to get out of that basement. I've worked in the basement before. You have no windows, or the windows that you have, at least one of the area places where I worked, they looked out to the grass like it was nothing that you could really see. So I know about that basement work. But you were curious, you went out and found mentors,
Mhm.
you also were coachable and willing to pivot. You said you asked for what you were worth, what you felt that you were worth. You weren't afraid to ask for what you felt that you were worth. And you're a servant. And you said that it came from being with your mom, which now I learned we have something in common. My mother had me when she was 43. And my siblings were way older, grown, just about when I came along, 14 years behind the youngest child at the time. And so I understand I was always at my mother's heels. She took me everywhere, and just being part of that servant also. So you dropped a lot of great tips so far, and how you were able to build things from nothing.
Mhm.
Those various agencies you came in and built programs and things for nothing. So tell me, I wanted for our listeners, what's one thing that employees overlook when they're trying to advance or break into a successful role, or move forward?
I think they overlook making their contributions and their work visible to decision makers.
Mm. So tell me more about that. Like, what do you mean specifically? What should they be focusing on?
Yeah, so it's important to kind of know what I would call who's who in the zoo.
Mm. Okay.
So, understanding organizational structures, understanding who has title power versus real power,
Mm.
understanding which problems different divisions or business units are trying to solve, and then your role on those specific projects, right? And then how do you communicate your contribution to those roles, and
Mm.
making sure that the people who can influence and make decisions are aware of your contributions. It's a
Mm.
critical step in your career.
You said something very important about those who are actually have influence versus the titles, because sometimes people who have the titles don't have the influence. They aren't the movers and the shakers, as they say.
Yes.
And it could be that administrative assistant who has the influence versus that director that they work for.
Yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
that is very important for us to know, no matter what we're doing, whether we are in a career or having our own business. So I want to pivot, because now you've talked about your government career, and you haven't even gotten to the last part of your career,
Mm-hmm.
but you just recently separated from the federal government, being in a position of influence, being in a position where you help to build not only a coaching program within the agency in which you just left, but also a program that taught people in other agencies. And I'm a proud alum of the Treasury Executive Institute coaching program. You're an author of a book, a co-author of the book with the Coaching in the Federal Government, which is an excellent book. So now you have your own business at Choice Coaching and Consulting LLC. Tell us about how that vision came about.
Yeah, so during COVID, um, everybody had time on their hands. And in the back of my mind was always like, it would be so nice to do this coaching thing full time. And in my agency work as a Fed, I just kind of made sure that that was what my job was, So I figured out how to be an entrepreneur.
Mm.
So when I worked for Homeland and then I moved to IRS, I strategically said no to projects, and I strategically helped them to understand why building a coaching culture was important.
Mm.
So that was, I knew that I have a sweet spot for coaching, and I could figure out how to make that happen, right? So during COVID, things kind of were on pause. I think we were in the midst of a coach training program, and we had to pivot
Mm.
to virtual from in person. And so we had more time on our hands. And I thought, now's probably the best time to start this business.
Mm.
And so I created At Choice Coaching and Consulting. And that's the easy part, the LLC, creating a name. That was cute. The little logo, that was all cute. But I was like, but what am I going, how am I going to get clients? Like, this is different because in the government, you just have clients.
Right.
But, this was different. So I learned that there were coaching benches that I could become part of that would funnel me clients. And
Okay.
because I didn't have a lot of time, I'm still working full time for the government. And I would work my company At Choice Coaching in the evenings. And I
Mm-hmm.
found a company that's based in California. And so their hours, of course, when I'm getting off work in Eastern time, it works perfectly to coach them during their time. And so that's how At Choice Coaching and Consulting was born. It was born during COVID with me saying, let me start to build up some clientele. Let me start to get some contracts and
Mm-hmm.
some work under my name.
Mm-hmm.
And it started off slow, but I just kind of took my time, and it was great. But that was a very pivotal moment for me, because when this time came around where things changed quickly for us to retire,
Mm-hmm.
my business has been established for 5 years.
Mm.
And I worked with another great coach in the California area, who I also learned about charging what you're worth. Because sometimes, you know, negotiating salary is one thing, but then when you own your own business, deciding what your rates and your fees are is a whole nother thing. So, here in the DC area, right, I think people were charging like, 150 an hour, the
Right.
200 an hour. And I started talking to people in California, and I was like, you charge what? Oh, they pay you now. Granted, that's the .com era and the location, but
Right.
still. And so that's where I learned to start charging for what I was worth as an entrepreneur.
Mm.
And so I just kept working my business, and I would say there were days where I was working full time for government, and then had a full client load from like 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And I would
Mm.
do that 3 to 4 days a week. And then I'd also work on some Sunday nights.
Mm.
So I just kind of, and I had goals, right? I wanted to retire. I knew I wanted to retire, but I didn't know it was going to be so early. I thought 57. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
53, right? So I was like, well, this is back in 2018. I really want to go to Florida. I've convinced my husband we need to build our retirement house. I need to furnish it. I need to
Mm-hmm.
get everything I want and pay for everything before I retire at 57. So I had a goal in mind, which then made sense about why I started my business, because that would give me extra income
Right.
on top of the income I was making in the federal sector. And
Mm-hmm.
so that for me, my father always told me to kind of like stay on the good foot. That was his little Southern way of saying
Uh-huh.
always be prepared. He would say, get on the good foot, Snoop. He called me Snoop. I'm not sure it's Snoopy, I don't know. But it was get on the good foot, Snoop. So Chéri has always been like, what's my plan B?
Mm.
And it was starting that business. And so when this situation happened in January, February, I was already secure
Mm-hmm.
with another gig that could have at any moment gone full time, but I just didn't have the time for it to go full time. And
Right.
so when this happened, that's what started. So that's sort of how my business started, and how I just kept working it throughout. There are a couple of other points I want to just make sure I share with the listeners about their government careers.
Mm-hmm.
One, I mentioned, identify your opportunities early. So be looking, like keep an eye out. You might be heads down and grinding over here, but keep an
Mhm.
eye and an ear out about what's happening in your market and in your industry, and try to stay on top of it,
Yes.
and surround yourself with the people who are leaders in that, so that you too can speak from a place of knowledge, and then maybe create something that doesn't
Mhm.
exist to solve a problem. We talked about making your work visible to decision makers. The other thing, negotiate with confidence. Know your worth. All people can do is say no.
Yeah.
So, and if you're going to negotiate, don't start at what you want, because they're going to always pull you down from there. So you
Mhm.
got to start at maybe 50K, 25K higher than what you want, so that when you negotiate, you have room to
Right.
come down and still, have what you want. The other thing is that promotions aren't, they don't happen by accident, they are strategic. So this is about, kind of, again, knowing the organization. Where do you want to be? How are you going to get there? What do you need to know? Who do you need to connect with? What relationships do you need to nurture? So
Mhm.
that way you're doing this all along. And oh, by the way, it's not just a take, take, take. You have to be giving too. So you
Right.
have to give back to people. You have to help people. I help people as much as I possibly can. I would walk by the desk and see somebody and be like, okay, I'm going to mentor her.
Mm.
And I'd be like, hey, let's go to lunch. I know you don't know me, but my name is Chéri, and I see some potential in you. And let me
Mhm.
share what I think. And I've done that to so many people, and we're still friends to this very day. So you have to give back. So you have to be thinking strategically, but also give back. The other point I would make about, your climbing and scaling the ladder, or corporate or federal, is choosing high visibility projects to the extent that you have a choice. So
Okay.
know what's going on, know where the organization is like, this is a priority project. Then you need to figure out how to get on it if you can. What else would I say? I think that's really it. Building relationships before you need them. That goes
Mhm.
back to kind of understanding who's who in the zoo, and who are the influencers, the movers and the shakers, and decision
Right.
makers. So those
Yes.
are just a couple of points I wanted to make sure people had. And I also wanted to clarify, I contributed to the book Coaching in Government. So I have a page in there and my stories in there, but I wasn't
Yes.
an author. One of the
Okay.
I think it was 3 or 4 of our colleagues, but I'm
Mhm.
in there with my story. So yes,
Yes,
so
I do remember you being in there, so I apologize. I gave
oh,
you
that's
more
okay.
credit, but I do remember you being in the book. And I also neglected to say that you have earned, and rightly so, the title of Master Certified Coach through the International Coaching Federation, which is the highest that ranking you can go as a coach under International Coaching Federation. And so, and I mean, that's an honor, as well as it's hard work. It's hard work to get to that level. So kudos to you
Thank you.
for being, and I it correct me if I'm wrong, but you were one of the first in the federal government to receive that level. If I'm Am I correct?
The first person of color, for sure.
Okay. All right.
The first
Yes.
person of color, yes, that
Yes.
I am aware of, and nobody has stood up and said me too. So I think that's pretty much a fact. Yeah, the first person of color in the federal government to
Yes.
win that.
All right. So we still are waiting for those of you that are online to give us your comments and any questions that you have for Cherie in the remaining time that we have. But I do want, Cherie, for you to talk a little bit more about your business, your coaching programs that you offer.
Yes. So I am Cherie, right? But AKA the Diva Whisperer. And DIVA is an acronym for a framework that I branded as part of my DIVA Breakthrough Experience. So, just a little bit about identifying a niche in coaching. You know, as coaches, we learn we can coach anyone that is willing and that wants to kind of work through something, reach a goal. We can coach anybody. It doesn't matter what field they're in or what they've done in life and what accomplishments they have or don't have. We can coach anybody. But it's good to kind of specialize, because then you bring something special to the relationship. And when I, as a coach, was working with my own coach, because I think it's very hypocritical for um, us as coaches if we don't do our own work. and we don't have our own coaches and therapists because we all have baggage and stuff. So
Right.
at various times when you need a therapist, get one,
Mm-hmm.
because this needs to be clear so it aligns with this, your heart, so you can do the things you need to do in full, and peace and serenity. So um, as I was working, with my coach, they were helping me to define a niche. And I actually was kind of all cerebral in my head about who I was going to work with and who's going to be my target audience. So I'll share this because if anybody needs a niche and they're thinking about it, this might be something for you. And I've got some stuff that I started that I can give to you if you just reach out to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm going to work with MBA graduates who are ready to either start their own companies or join an organization, as a business executive of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to help them translate what they learned in an academic environment to how do they apply that in the real world.
Mm.
And I was like, so it sounded so good to me. And I was telling my coach all about it. And he was like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. He said, but Chéri, he said, usually you're part of your niche. And, I don't hear a lot of excitement about it, but I was like, yeah, I said, well, number one, I don't have an MBA. So that right there takes me out because I don't have an MBA. And then I was like, and can I even feel like I can speak authentically? Because I feel like sometimes, even though we don't give advice as coaches and we don't tell people what to do and we don't need the experience, I think there's something that is spoken for that it speaks to when you've had some experience of the grind and the thing that you've accomplished the thing. So when you're talking to people, they know,
Right.
like really, what that was like for them. So I was like, yeah, that don't feel authentic. So, but then I was mad at my coach because I was like, you know how long I worked on coming up with this?
Mm-hmm.
I was hot, but that's good. When your coach or your therapist makes you mad, that means it's working.
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks later, I get back with him and he says, I said, I got it. I used my AI, Roscoe. I'll tell
Uh-huh.
you about Roscoe at another time. If y'all not on AI and
How about
really
that?
know AI, you need to get with it. And I can
Yeah.
use some resources where people who I know what they're doing with this,
Mm-hmm.
know how to help you out. Well, Roscoe helped me. He said that I've named him. His name is Roscoe. I call him a he, but he said to me through AI, he said, Chéri, I said, I'm having a conflict. I think I'm going to work with MBA students or primary breadwinners, women who are primary breadwinners in their family. And I'm having a hard time like really choosing. And Roscoe says, do you mind? I have a hunch. Do you mind if I share it with you? And I was like, sure. And he says, there's so much more passion around these primary breadwinning women that you want to help support
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that they're taking care of themselves because they've taken care of everyone else and they do all the things, they're superwomen.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how my signature talk came about because I was like, yeah, I did feel like superwoman and I'm ready to take off the cape. So it became my niche to work with primary breadwinning women, who are the center of gravity for their families, financially, emotionally, strategic, all the things,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they're exhausted. And so I want to help them release or ditch the cape. And I want them to really put themselves on their calendar. I want them to reset their nervous system. I want them to really understand that they are their instrument and that they can't pour from an empty cup. Therefore, they have to create the space and time to
Mm-hmm.
nurture themselves and to nurture the relationship with themselves, because that's the same relationship that shows up everywhere else. So I
Mm-hmm.
take my women on a journey for either 6 months or a year in the Diva Breakthrough Experience, Foundations or Mastery.
Mm-hmm.
And we go through understanding and redefining what their success means and what it looks like for them, not for anyone else. And
Mm-hmm.
so the Diva Breakthrough Experience, the D stands for deconstructing and discovering what it is that they need to do differently and to discover their limiting beliefs and how they're getting in their own way because of parental programming, worrying about what he says or she says,
Right.
limiting beliefs, all the things. The I stands for installing and then inspiring this new way of thinking and being.
Mm-hmm.
And the V then stands for vitality and vibration, because they're going to come to life in a way that they have never known before because they haven't given themselves this permission before. They haven't spent the time with unloading all the other stuff and now picking up the things that feed them, that nurture them, that make them joyful and at peace and not resentful because they
Mm-hmm.
have to, but they get to do
Yes.
what they choose to. They instead of being over givers,
Mm-hmm.
they are generous with boundaries and limits.
Mm-hmm.
That feels really good. So the A then stands for aligning their life with true artistry and abundance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the framework that I use to take my women through. You've secured the bag. You've taken care of everyone. You've been the sandwich generation many times, raising families, taking care of elderly parents, taking care
Right.
of a husband or a spouse or a partner, taking care of, yourself a little bit, maybe you'll
Right.
go to your appointments, maybe you'll get your mammogram, but you put that
Right.
off,
Mm-hmm.
put that
Mm-hmm.
off until your body starts screaming at you. My
Right.
goal is to make sure that my divas hear the whispers of their bodies
Mm.
and that they then tend to themselves so that they can then do what they want to and need to for others, but not from an empty cup. So that's the whole premise of my work and my coaching engagements. And I only want to work with, I have a very small number. So
Right.
my limit is like 10 to 20 women per year. So this is all the Diva Breakthrough Experience launched this year.
Okay.
And that's my goal. Not more than 20 women, and probably 10 is enough because I'm going to be with them, that ride or die from
Mm-hmm.
day one,
Mm-hmm.
focused on them. And I'm not doing like, you get only 6 sessions because this transformation is visceral and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take more than that.
So you have it within a time frame, but it's just based on the agreement that you have between your client and you on how many sessions they'll have. But we know that it's going to be impactful just based on what you've shared and about yourself as well as what you shared about the program. So if anyone is interested, whether you're listening live now or you listen to this recording in the future, make sure you reach out to Chéri directly. You see her information right here on the screen, and you'll be able to learn more about the Diva experience, this breakthrough experience that she is going to take you through, and how you can get to the next level, whatever that next level looks like for you within your mind, because she went through it. She talked about how she came through from being a teen mom all the way up to where she is now with her awesome career in the federal government and now moving into her business and having those that mindset, of whatever that goal is and continually looking at and going towards those goals that she has. I know she's not going to show it now, but she showed me this huge board that she has with all her ideas listed on there. And I'm going to tell you something, Chéri. One thing I heard is that when we write things down, we are more apt to do them. And when we tell others, we feel more accountable to get them done because people are watching and they're listening. And I've had that because for a few years, I have said, when I become fully eligible, I'm going to retire. I'm going to retire. I'm retired. So as I got closer to the date, I became fully eligible in January of 2025. And as I got closer, like last November, I think people say, "Shirley, you retiring, Shirley?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not eligible yet, but what?" And so when everything happened, I was just like, "What? It's here. I've been wanting to do it." So just this repeating and telling people that you have goals, they're watching you. They may not say anything, but they're watching to see what you're going to do. And when you write things down for yourself, then you're more apt to getting those things done, whether you have it written on a board, written on sticky notes, written in a journal, electronically, just going back, putting them on your calendar. We have to make time for ourselves. And so, one thing, I know you said that you had your own coach. I want, before we end, I want you to give some tips on how we can make sure that as a superwoman and taking off those capes, what are maybe one or two tips you can say that we could do for self care?
Ooh. Massages, full body massages as often as you can. I was going once a week at one point.
Mm, mm,
I don't care how much it costs, you're worth it.
mm-hmm,
So, full body massages, and then spending time alone, stillness and silence.
mm,
So, you can hear your own thoughts, you can hear your heartbeat. You have to spend time in quiet, not caring for anybody else, but just with yourself. So figure out what part of each week, or at least every 2 weeks, because a lot happens in a week. So that's what I'm saying, at least each week. But if you can't do it every week, pick one time every 2 weeks,
mm-hmm,
at a bare minimum once a month. But sometime, like an hour, where you're just, maybe you read something and then you just want to sit quietly. If you're a Bible reader, or if you want to listen to a self-help development book, right, where you're growing, whatever, but then sit quietly
mm-hmm.
and notice what you notice. You have to be with yourself, and you have to want to be with yourself. So those are two things that I make sure that I do. I am a huge advocate of the 5 a.m. Club, that book. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if anybody's heard of it or read it, by
Mm-hmm.
Robin Sharma, the 5 a.m. Club. He talks about his 20-20-20 plan. And there's something very special about getting up before dawn and making that first hour your victory hour.
Mm. Okay. Okay. I'm going to write that down, the 5 a.m. club.
Mm-hmm.
And then quickly, maybe one or two um, tips or steps for those who are trying to get to that next level. Everybody can increase their salary by 174,000, but whatever they can do, what are like the a few tips that they can do in order to start that movement?
Yes. So just remember, number one, that promotions, they are about your talent and your effort, but it's really about being very strategic. You need to be thinking 3 steps ahead
Mm,
about where you want to be, so that everything you do each day is moving you toward that goal. And, it's important for you to make your efforts and your value known, because people can't reward what they don't know.
mm,
So sometimes people are like, I don't like talking about myself. I don't like, I can't, I don't market myself. You
mm.
need to learn how to do it. Call me. We'll work on it.
Definitely, definitely. Well, I thank you so much, Cherie, for spending this hour with us, giving us, sharing your background, sharing how you were able to boost your salary by 174,000, giving those wonderful tips, making sure people understand to step out your comfort zone, be willing to pivot, look for mentors, be coachable, be a servant, and just knowing who gives the influence versus those who have the title, and so much more. If you missed anything, then you go back and look at the recording, and make sure you reach out to Cherie if you have any questions about her program, or you want to learn more. She says she has some different niches that you might want to pick up and some information that she can share with you. So make sure you reach out to her directly, and be available and listen to us on our recordings, as well as all the other segments of the Royal Nugget that you find on the Royalty Business Group YouTube page. And be ready for next month's segment. And again, thanks everybody. Thanks, Cherie, and have a great evening.
Thank you.